The brief was simple enough. Cadbury said to the agency, take an experimental budget and find out on film just how much you can do with roses to make them look better, more desirable than any other chocolates ever have, and to make exciting television advertising.
At the experimental work, we cut units in half and squeezed them. We held them in the hand, made very pretty patterns of them. We took a fresh strawberry, poured chocolate on it. Not content with this, however, we drowned it. We made a children's garden using the sweets as the center of the flowers. We planted the sweets, had them grow out of the pack. And finally, we cut the cartouche on the actual pack itself into the form of a door. You'll notice the string which pulls the door open, but it does show that we were only experimenting at this stage and weren't too worried about technique. It was decided that this, in fact, was the basis of a Roses campaign. We had considerable amount of trouble with the pack itself, having started out with one you can buy in the shops, but it didn't really reproduce in black and white well enough, and so we altered the tonal value, which still, it was felt, didn't get over the complete character of the Roses pack. And the client was quite right in suggesting that we ought to go to a different tonal value altogether, which we did. Well, the problem itself had been solved visually, and so that it seemed only natural that the campaign should be planned from a visual point of view. And here you see the art director preparing the storyboard, which in fact shows the client and all of us who are making the commercial what it's going to be like. The copywriter writes the script for it. And the producer, art director and copywriter have a final chat about the board before it's presented to client, which on his approval, it goes into production. This involves going to the production company and talking to the director about the commercial and getting an estimate for its cost, which on approval by the client gets us onto the floor on the scheduled date. Here again is the storyboard which we pin up in the studio as our reference for the film we're making.
It takes a lot of paraphernalia to shoot a Roses film. There are about 14 rolls of wrapping paper, lots of different size boxes with the white rose on the dark, sort of scalpels and tweezers and wrapped chocolates and scissors and goodness knows what. This shows that a chocolate out of the tin is very much inferior visually to one that's come off the production line. They both taste the same, of course, but when you're going to show one huge on television, it has to be absolutely perfect.
The mechanics of the door take considerable working out, so we spend some time in just seeing that it will work smoothly before we start filming. Here, the art director and her assistant is in fact arranging the door shot.
You're working in a very confined space, so that once you've set the sweets up, the last sweet going in, you know, you have to be terribly careful, otherwise you move the whole lot up and then you have to start again.
We don't, in fact, have all the lights on at this point because they would melt the chocolate. But once the art director is happy that she's done her work, we light the scene and are ready to shoot it. And here the director, using tungsten wires to open the door because they don't show up in the lights, shoots the scene. And this is how the camera, in fact, saw it. The next setup was a shot we knew in the studio as a rose arbor scene.
We have to buy the roses about 2 days in advance so that they're completely open by the time shooting starts.
A scene of this sort takes a great deal of time and trouble to set up. And although it all looks very improvised in Heath Robinson, it does require a certain type of talent to do this. And so consequently, the choice of a production company on this sort of commercial is very important.
It takes ages to set a roses shot up. And once they're done and the lights are fully on, the roses wilt so quickly that if you haven't done the right take in about 20 minutes, you have to start again with new roses. They look pretty strange, but when you see it through the camera, they're all in perspective so that one will be out of focus, whereas another one is completely in focus. So from this angle, it just looks a terrible mess.
When the shot is nearly ready for taking, we add finishing touches, a bit of glycerine on the rose, which is an old film trick for a tear. Mechanics are checked, and the scene is taken. Now here, if you have a good camera operator and focus puller, they know jolly well whether in fact the scene they're filming is working well. In this case, they weren't happy. They felt they'd lost focus between the large close-up here and the box, and so they retook it straight away. While filming is in progress, the art director and her assistant are preparing bits and pieces for the next scene to be filmed.
It always looks as if we're messing around in a corner doing a rather sort of unprofessional job. I'm sure nobody would ever give us a job as a chocolate wrapper. We pack them a different way to the way the machine in the factory packs them. We use much more paper, so it looks a bit more lush.
And it would be a pity, having gone to all this trouble, if we didn't have a nice pair of hands to hold the sweets. So we use, in fact, a hand artist. Here she is preparing her hands in order to hold the sweets for an unwrapping sequence. The art director and another art director in her group select which ones she feels ought to be unwrapped in the scene, and they then line up and rehearse with the hand artist, who by this time has got her nail polish dry and is ready to film. This is very precise work because the focal limits, as you can see here, are very small on a lens of this nature, and so the slightest movement removes the sweet out of the picture altogether. The next scene required cutting the chocolates in half, so the director and art director at this point do discuss what is required not only from a photographic lighting point of view, but from an appetizing sweet point of view.
It's quite difficult to break the chocolate perfectly so the inside looks smashing, and you have to make sure you don't break the outer chocolate shell. If you make a model of these sweets, by the time they're in tremendous close-up, they look a bit sort of cementy. Chocolate has a tremendous sort of velvety quality, which really it's much better to show the real thing.
Scene is being set up and the cut chocolate was put on the end of a scalpel. This, however, was found not to be the most satisfactory way of lining it up, and so it was suggested we should put it on glass, which we then did. And here you see the art director very carefully arranging it, because again with a big close-up lens, 1/8 of an inch to the left or right, and the sweet disappears out of the picture altogether. And there you see what I mean. It is vast close-up. On completion of the filming, we do make a point of just checking that we have shot all the scenes. The art director's assistant packs up her bits and pieces, and the director takes his just reward. The following day, we look at rushes. The film director has already seen them, told us what he thinks of them, and we look at them ourselves. But then we come to the stage of having to make the completed soundtrack. The musicians we use are session musicians, extremely professional. They can come absolutely cold to a piece of music they've never seen before, and they can play it perfectly in a matter of minutes. They're very highly paid, and so we do have access to some of the finest musicians in the country. On completing the sound recording of the music, we then put the commentary or voiceover on, and here you see the voiceover artist reading the commentary. At this point, the soundtrack is complete, and we have to transfer it onto 35mm, which is the film medium. All the rushes are taken to the cutting room and prepared, and the producer checks with the editor the cutting copy. Extra scenes are selected. and they two are cut together. At this stage, the soundtrack and the picture are separate one from another. They are known as the double head. This enables us to alter the picture without, in fact, cutting the finished soundtrack. After a final check, one takes the double head back to the agency, and provided it is satisfactory, it is shown to the client.
This is the big moment, I suppose, when the client sees it for probably the first time, and we know it so well by now that one feels so personally involved that it matters tremendously whether he likes it or whether he doesn't.
There's a come and see me look when it's roses, and a know me better look when it's roses. Lots of strawberry kind of chocolates, and coffee kind of chocolates, and fudgy kind of chocolates when it's roses. Cadbury's roses. Don't be left outside a box of roses. They're only 3 and 2pence.
These roses commercials run for only half a minute, literally. And it may be that the technical resource and effort put into them seems disproportionate. But tens of thousands of pounds are invested in these commercials, and they are seen by tens of millions of people. The commercials have just one aim: to help sell Cadbury's roses to those millions of people. And that's why Rose's television commercials are made with all the care and skills at our command.